In sex addiction world, there's all different categories of behavior, one of which is relationship and multiple relationship or serial relationship or overlapping relationship and pervasive pattern over time. And so I think for some of those folks who have multiple affairs as part of one of their sexual acting out behavior, those boundaries of what's normal, what's friendship, what's crossing lines is really murky for those folks because there's some who sometimes grooming. How far can I push this that we can become a little bit more, whether that's conscious or unconscious, which could start as coworker, but then coworker of a certain way or a certain experience in life. There's these pushing of boundaries, these subtle limit testing that happens. And so that's a different kind of thing when sobriety is like, what is healthy relationships for every person separate, but in addiction, even more important to talk about and clarify. And this comes back to kind of, Dan, what you just said about having an agreement between the relationship partners of what the boundaries are and how to protect that and keep
Mhm.
that safe. Because especially if you're someone who has relationship addiction, lots of multiple affairs in your history, you have to be really careful with where those boundaries are, and where those boundaries are can be really triggering for betrayed because you never know what relationships the boundaries will be held and what relationship will they be extended.
I like what you're saying there. And it comes back for me to sort of like the question we started out with, which is how do you define an emotional affair? One way to define an emotional affair is it outside of the relational agreements or understandings that you have with
Mhm.
your partner about what you share, about sort of how you relate to other people, especially of the opposite gender if you're heterosexual, same gender if you're homosexual. But is it outside of those relational understandings? And the piece that's coming up for me is, and if you're unsure, have the conversation.
Yeah, that was my thought is how many couples consciously actually have this conversation? Because I think there's so much trust that goes into a partnership that, I think, do I really have to, spell this out for my partner? Shouldn't they just know what's appropriate and what's inappropriate? And a lot of times the answer is no, they don't know. And I think I've heard a lot of when this comes up around, well, was this an emotional affair? Is, oh no, she was just a friend. Oh no, he was just a friend. And we never had sex. We didn't do anything wrong. And so it gets the subtleties. I think it's all about the subtleties of it. And I think for each person to really hone in on, is this a piece where I'm feeling differently? Like, how do I feel with my partner? But then when I go to meet Joe for coffee, is it different? Do I dress differently? Do I do anything that I wouldn't do, I'm going to say as a woman, with my girlfriends?
Mhm.
Yeah.
So it's sort of a litmus test to say, yeah, maybe, even if the other person isn't engaging in a certain way, am I putting something else out there? Am I putting more into this relationship than is appropriate?
Can I add to that, Wendy? Because I think that's so important. And if you have trusted people in your life, don't just take your own a self-assessment as the litmus test, because I've seen, especially with a lot of this, there's a lot of self-delusion that goes on. And I've heard people, no, it's all platonic, it's fine, it's completely non-sexual, it's all this. But when they bring it to other people that are trusted in their life and they actually do share what's happening, that people are like, that doesn't sound so good. Or maybe, okay, great. But I feel like that I've seen that. I think so hallmark to what I've seen when it goes awry is there's layers of self-delusion that goes into it and justification, and it's not sexual and all that. So I mean, I think that's the importance of being in consultation with other trusted people